I need you to know something important. I love The Lion King.
It's so good.
But 100% my favorite is Scar.
You love Scar?
Well, no, but I do think he has the best song. The Be Prepared song.
The Be Prepared song
is my favorite song. Maybe in the entire Disney canon. It's close.
Wait, did this come up when we were doing the walk-up songs?
It must have, because
I was like, this is
because that familiar. Be Prepared song is my jam. There's the line, it says, "Unseen for the wonder I am," and I feel like people need that. They need to see me for the wonder that I am, Mark.
That's like, you know the movie Wish?
Obsessed.
Do you also love the song that the villain sings there about this is the thanks I get?
I mean, I do a little bit. I do. So it's funny you bring up Wish because Samuel lately has been very into Disney movies, specifically Moana, but all of a sudden the music from Wish, he doesn't seem to want to watch the movie as much.
He likes the music.
But the song I'm a Star,
it's a good one.
He calls it the squirrel song because there's a squirrel that starts singing it.
Okay.
And then because he's seen the video from it, there's like this like one line that's like really fast that this turtle says. And so Sammy goes, "Hi, turtle. Bye, turtle." Like when that part is done, he loves it. I think that movie is underrated.
I do too.
I think
people thought it was too much of like a Disney propaganda movie. That was what I got.
Really?
Yeah.
Maybe. I could see that. I love it. The little, what Sammy calls the drum song, where it's the knowing what I know now. I think that song is one of my favorite all-time songs. And I love also when they like stand up, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, I love that movie. It gets me. We watched it with the youth this summer. They also did not care for it that much.
Yeah.
Some of them did, but like, it's not as universally adored as I think it should be. It is not seen for the wonder. It is.
It has a lot of, I feel like if you grew up with Disney movies, it's probably a pretty like millennial parent.
Sure.
Because of all the like Easter eggs to all the other Disney movies
fair.
that maybe
That's fair.
Don't really
but then like, okay, look at Frozen. First of all, Elsa. I'm going to say it. It needs to be said, okay? Elsa has some problems, and she needs to see a therapist. We should not just be going off into winter ice caves by ourselves because we can't deal with these people. We shouldn't just be like, let them all go. Like, the icy equivalent of let it burn.
All out.
Yeah. Like, maybe learn how to deal with yourself and your big feelings, Elsa. I'm just saying, she needs to learn how to deal with big feelings. Are okay.
What's your all-time favorite Disney, I wouldn't like you said, gospel according to Disney.
Yes, I did.
Is there like one particular Disney movie that you think captures some sort of gospel lesson, gospel point, something about who God is or what we believe that they do really well?
I would say Encanto.
Okay.
Which I'm sure I did not pronounce correctly because I never do. I said it one time to like,
right?
Well, I said it to a group of preschoolers once. I was corrected 3 times by the preschooler who was bilingual. I'm not saying it quite correct, but that's okay. I think maybe that movie because I think it. So the premise, if you haven't seen it, it's wild if you haven't seen it. Yeah. The premise is that there's this family who receives a miracle, which I think is what Encanto means, is miracle. No?
Yeah, miracle, enchantment, sort of, it's all. Yeah.
And so they receive this miracle after a tragedy, and it leads them to this whole new life, and everyone in their family gets some kind of special power or gift. And they get it at a certain age and stuff.
Yeah.
And then there's one young girl, Mirabelle. She does not get a gift when she becomes that age.
Right.
And so she wrestles her whole life with not feeling very special. And she's in this, like, her whole family's, she calls it a constellation, right? And everybody gets to shine. I know all the words. And And then things start to go sideways, and it looks like they're losing their miracle. And what they find out is that the miracle wasn't these things that they could do. The miracle was the way they were held together. Mm-hmm. And that actually that was something that Mirabelle did really well because she'd had to learn. Mm-hmm. She had to learn that the miracle was the gift of one another and being a part of the family. Yeah. So I don't know if that's actually the best one, but it's the one that came to mind because that's another one of the ones we have to listen to on repeat all the time. Yeah. But I think at least with our sermon series, it kind of goes with this idea of like coming together and recognizing the gift of one another.
Yep. Yeah.
What would you say?
Oh, mine is definitely the ending to Moana.
The ending to Moana. Oh, all that like redemption and stuff?
Yeah, which I do feel like is a pretty big spoiler if you haven't seen the movie. And so I don't really want to spoil it.
That movie is several years old.
I guess so. All right, I'll spoil it.
Moana 2 comes out next week.
Pause this if you have not seen it. 'Cause I'm
don't
gonna spoil
listen.
the ending of the movie.
Okay.
But I love how the whole premise of the movie is set up on this villain that you think is horrible and nasty and bad and needs to be destroyed.
Okay.
Until you get to the end of the movie and you realize the reason the villain is so horrible is because someone stole their heart.
Yeah.
And that the way to defeat this enemy is actually to heal the enemy and to give them their heart back.
Yeah.
And I just think it's a beautiful lesson of this. This is what the gospel looks like. This is what we don't come to defeat our enemies in battle. We come to see the restoration of our world. Yeah. And somehow in great love, that's what it looks like too. Yeah. So I love it. I think it was a great, like I remember the first time seeing it being like, oh man, I can't believe I didn't see that coming. If it felt like a good reversal of what you would expect. Yeah. Because you think they're going to have to like figure out some valiant way to defeat the bad. What is the, what are they?
Tikka.
Yeah, Tikka. Uh-huh. And you find out you had it wrong.
You had it wrong. We didn't talk about those movies exactly, but you did mention Lion King. Yeah. And the importance of remembering who you are. Mm-hmm. Like little Simba has to learn. Mm-hmm. So, you ready to get into it?
Yes.
Let's talk about it. I'm Becca. I'm the pastor of family ministries here at Katy First.
And I'm Mark. I'm the senior pastor here at Katy First.
Welcome to the Katy First Family Podcast, where we offer ideas, inspiration, and encouragement to help you and your family grow as joyful disciples of Jesus Christ. And this week, we are talking about remembering who we are as we come to the table.
Yep. So our second week of this communion series, and in our liturgy that we do at a communion table, this is sort of the big middle part that we refer to as the Great Thanksgiving. Also where we get the word Eucharist from. The other maybe traditions, well, our tradition sometimes will maybe call it the Eucharist. But anyway, it's that big middle part is essentially telling the story of who God is and who Jesus is and who the Holy Spirit is. And it's a whole, it's a story. It's helping us remember. Mm-hmm. And so just talked about kind of rooted that in the first communion, being at a Seder meal, and how that meal for Jewish people is a story of remembering who they are and who God is and what God has done. And so when Jesus incorporates that in there, it's obviously we're a part of that story, but it's sort of that same thing of like, hey, there is a story that you belong to. And so I don't think I need to go through them, but sort of talked about how some of those elements, what it means for us to remember that Christ is at that table, that we, in our Methodist theology, believe that we can't fully explain it, but we really believe there is a real presence of God's grace. Yeah. When we come together and we bless the bread and the grape juice, in our case. Yeah. Like, it's not just symbolic. It's sacrament. Yeah. And there's a real presence of God's grace in this.
I think this is important because different traditions hold different things. Yep. And so if you're coming to the table here at Katy First or United Methodist Church, understanding kind of what we think, not that it bars you from coming to our table, that's not the case at all, but just so that you know, right, just for knowledge, that we do think that there's something special.
Yeah.
It's not just bread and juice, but we don't really know how.
Yeah.
You had this great line that I wrote out exactly because it was so good. Is that awkward when I do that to you?
No, I'm always curious of what.
You said, I cannot tell you where it is in it. I cannot tell you where it is in here, but I know I am receiving it, referring to like the presence of Christ and grace.
Yeah.
You talked about that even with like bananas.
Yeah, that was.
I thought that was so funny.
I was like, I don't know if that's heresy, but we'll find out.
No, it was a good, I think that it has potassium in it. You just don't know like where.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It's just in there somewhere. I thought that was so, it's just woven in there with like the carbs and the gluten.
Right. Yeah.
There's also grace and the presence of Christ.
Yeah.
I think that is so good. And I think too, one of the things I love about that in our theology is that it allows God to just be mystery.
Yeah.
We don't have to know. We don't have to pinpoint and say this piece is actual body or this is actual grace. We can know it's just in there and that we're receiving it and being transformed by it. And the mystery of it is actually part of the gift.
Yeah.
Which I think is somewhat unique.
Yeah.
So, because there are definitely traditions who it's special, but it doesn't have that same kind of sacramental moment to it. And then there are some that it is literally somehow the body and blood of Christ. And it's that, but it's not quite that for us.
Yeah.
So it's important to know. Yeah. I think it's helpful to know. Maybe important is not the right word, but.
Yeah, I do think helpful. I think, I think communion on its own, if we believe what it is, doesn't have to be explained. It can just be received. You don't have to make sense of it.
Right.
But it's helpful. And I think this is one of those in particular. Growing up, I didn't think about, is there the real presence of God's grace in this thing or not?
Yeah, definitely didn't.
It's like, but like even now I have to kind of remember and kind of remembering that like there is real significance in this.
Yeah.
And we don't believe in some sort of weird kind of like some sort of magical thing is happening here or something. But we truly believe. Wesley called this a means of grace, meaning this is one of these. In fact, it's like the main one that Christ has given to us as the church. Of like, this is one reliable action and practice that you can do where that grace of God is given and received.
Yeah.
And I think just remembering that, thinking upon that. You don't have to force yourself into making a lot of it. You just kind of let it be. And I don't know. So, even as I was preparing for this, thinking about how, one of the things I talked about in the ancient world, everyone sacrificed, and you sacrifice food at temples. And that was a big deal because by eating sacrificed meat from any one temple the idea is that you're feasting with that God of that temple. And so, we know there was a Passover lamb, and they take that meat that's sacrificed in the temple. It's at the Seder table. It's one way of saying in a very tangible way, this is like you're dining with God. And so I think when Jesus says, this is my body, this is my blood, that means a lot of things. But at least one thing it says is like, when we really see this table, when we become more aware of it as a place of God's grace is really here with us. Yeah. And that's a big statement. I can't fully explain that. Yeah. It's like I can't but we can say it without fully being able to know how to explain it. And it just adds such depth and meaning, and there's so much that we can remember as we gather to this table. We remember who Christ was, what Christ has done. We remember how that impacts us. Remember, there's a lot that we can pull to this table, and it just grounds us. It helps us have a point to come back to, and even like I said, we often call this the Last Supper, and that's sort of always true. We come to the table. It's a way of saying like, this is the old is passing. And it's also the first meal of the new thing that God is doing. Every time we come, as many times as we can come. Yeah. And honestly, you've been in churches that do this every Sunday. John Wesley was like, do this as often as you can.
Yeah.
And even though we do it just once a month on the first Sunday, the idea was do it as much as you can, because that's, if we really believe that this is a tangible means of grace,
we should want more of that.
We should want more of that.
Yeah. You called it, I think you called it, I don't think that I made this up, but I might have. You called it squirmy Jesus.
I probably did say that.
I love it so much, though. When we talk about, kind of squirmy, when in this holy meal, Jesus stands up and is like, hey, this is my body, to his buddies, like to his friends. And this is my blood. It is squirmy. It is uncomfortable. Yeah. It would have had a lot of questions for them, like it does still for us now. Yeah. But one of the things is that's what we say when you receive communion, or when we give bread and the juice, and this is the body of Christ broken or given for you. This is the blood of Christ shed for you. I mean, that's pretty rough.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I don't know that all people know is that's not what we say when littles come up.
Yeah.
I don't. That's not what I say.
No. And most, but I think I know at least you and I, and there are some others that, will, my common phrase, I'm not even sure what you say because I can't.
Because you can't hear me because you're doing your thing? I don't know what you say either, actually.
I just say this is God's love given for you.
Oh, that's nice.
That's all I say.
I say every time you eat this, remember Jesus loves you.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to point them to what that moment is supposed to be.
Yeah.
So that when they get older and they hear the body of Christ given for you, they can go, oh, every time I eat this. You know what I mean? But also, I'm the kind of person who, if I could use 10 words instead of 5, well, why wouldn't I do that? Yeah. It's like there was a sale on words.
Yeah.
So I think that's good. I like yours.
Yep.
I think that it's important just to do that, just because it is a weird idea. And if you are 5 and you come up for communion with your family, and really you're just here for the snack, and then some robed person that you may or may not know very well is like, here's the body of Jesus, and your concept of Jesus is like buddy Jesus, who hangs out and keeps you safe. That's terrifying. And it shouldn't be. It should maybe be awe-inspiring, but not terrifying. To come to the communion table. So I think it's important to note that we do say something a little different to the littles. And not every kid comes up and wants to take communion. Every single time we have communion, I have a kiddo who only wants the bread. Or doesn't want either. If I have a mom come by with a baby, sometimes I'll say a little prayer for them real quick. Because I'm not giving your 6-month-old bread. That's weird. I'm not doing that. Seems like a bad call on my part.
Baby's gonna be.
That's not a good thing. It's not
good
for their tummy.
Things aren't gonna go well.
It's not good for them. You said a lot of other things too. I have a list.
Oh, okay, good.
And it's in red.
I like it.
One of the other things that I think we should talk about that I thought was really good is you talked about the communion table and the liturgy around it as a great story. And I love tying it in with the story that was already going on with the Jewish people of this inherited idea of from the Passover meal and the lamb of Passover sacrifice, all of which you've already talked about today as well. But you talked about how it was this moment of not being a slave anymore, now as well, not just in remembering it from leaving Egypt, but Christ saying, you are not a slave now, you are free in the kingdom of God that is happening now. And I think that is such a good story. I think it is so, I don't know, easy is the right word. Holding on to who we are in the midst of all of these other things that want to tell us who we are, right? Is a difficult thing to do. And it doesn't matter if what you're trying to hold on to is some kind of theology or just a little bit of hope or the knowledge of God's grace in your life, whatever. It's difficult. the other day, I was telling you this earlier, I was scrolling through TikTok because I have a problem, and the algorithm has me figured out. So it will drop into my lap like things that are specific to the UMC because it knows. Yeah. It knows. Or like Steven the other day laughed at me and he's like, I love how you watch an entire movie in like 3-minute increments. Because that's what ends up happening on TikTok is it like sends me the same show over and over again in like these little bites. Because I watched it before and I watched the whole thing. So the algorithm figures me out. I feel like the world around us has this algorithm and it's watching us. Yeah. And it'll feed us all kinds of weird stuff. Yeah. And it is so relentless. Yes. That becomes the story. And so to have this where we come to the table and to again hear the story of being set free for the sake of love and grace. Yeah. Is such like that story becomes part of who we are, and it does become louder than the stuff around us the more we come to that table. Yeah. Which is I think really needed right now.
Yeah, for sure.
To hear that good story.
Yeah, I mean I think the whole sermon was based in that idea of story and story making meaning for us, and that is I almost said that's the story of our faith. So I was trying to find a different word, but that's yeah. From the very beginning, we are our faith is one that's rooted in great stories that have continued to tell us who we are, and honestly, I mean, like, outside of Jesus, and obviously that's big, and a little bit of Acts, then a lot of it's like letters and stuff in the New Testament. So a lot of that story it's the Jewish roots. It's the Hebrew Bible. It's the stories that are there that then Jesus brings to life, fulfills. And so like I just think that those stories are so impactful. And Brene Brown talks about like we make up stories in our brain all the time. Yeah. We make up stories about what people think about us, how we interpret a situation. We're just wired to make and live in a story. And how, as you said, this communion table is one way that we can align into the story that matters the most and that is most defining for who we truly are. Individually, yes, and collectively, who we are. And that's, obviously, that is what we need. We need a better story that's more healing and hopeful and forgiving and freeing and just and kind. And yeah. And, I think that's why this communion table has lasted. If this practice was just kind of a side thing, I don't think it would have lasted 2,000 years. But quite literally, it's from the first day of resurrection when Jesus on the Emmaus Road and when Jesus by the Sea of Galilee, depending on what gospel you're reading, he breaks bread. I mean, it's a direct allusion, a direct connection to that Last Supper is also his first. And so from day one, we've been breaking bread and coming around these elements. And it has been the central thing from the beginning that has reminded us and grounded us, empowered us, united us. We pray in that prayer, make us one with each other, one in ministry to all the world, and until Christ comes again and we feast at his heavenly banquet. I mean, there's just so much packed into this liturgy because somewhere along the line, some really smart people packed in succinct ways a lot of words that every one of them has punch, but it's just powerful. It really is. Yeah. And you kind of have to soak it in. You keep going back to it. You let it slowly form you and shape us. And there's a lot, literally a lot to chew on. A lot that can keep telling us good news.
I think part of what is so important, again, going back to the fact that like we don't know how Christ is present exactly in this meal, but we know that Christ is truly present and grace is truly available. And we don't have to know what that means. Recognizing that allows us to come to the table and be formed by it. And therefore, if that's a story we're listening to, that does start to form us up. And so if your kids don't totally, you don't have to unpack the theology for them, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. Just allowing them to like kind of be there. It's why it's been really important for us that the kids come back for communion. They need to be able to come to that table. You need to be able to do it as a family. And listen, that may not be possible every week. I am right now, like I don't take communion with Sammy. He's still in the nursery. At some point, I say this with so much fear. At some point, he needs to be in the service. And there will be a day when he decides to throw one of his silent rebellion fits. Yeah. He doesn't usually yell. He just throws himself down on the ground and just expires. And so it's not, if you've got your kid and they're in the connection center and today is not their day to come to the table of the Lord. Yeah. First of all, you don't have to, it's okay with us if they're rowdy. We're here for some noise. We're here for some wiggles. Like that's not a problem. But if it just doesn't, if you can't come down the aisle, you can receive it right where you are, or also just know that you too are somehow receiving the presence and grace of Christ just by being together. And that is the story that's being told over us and in all the different places of our life. Because it is tough and we want good stories for our kids. And we want, this needs to be a central part of the story of who we are as a family. It's individual families as well as a larger family of God. That we are a family of grace and of love and of being loved. I'm
thinking about our favorite phrase. We haven't used it in a while, but it's playing the long game.
As soon as you said our favorite phrase, I was like, long game. Like I knew.
But I mean, it's that again, like I didn't think about this as a kid, but I know I've taken communion forever and it meant a lot, even though I didn't know what it meant. And so like, I do know, we get a lot of people from just different faith backgrounds that didn't grow up in perhaps, there's some churches that do communion twice a year. There's some that do it every Sunday. There's some that you can't receive it until a certain period. And so I know a lot of maybe families come just sort of unsure what to do with my kid.
And that's so fair.
And so I think just kind of reiterating, and we say this every time, this is an open table. And what we mean by that is truly anyone can come. The only requirement is that you're willing to come and you're willing to come on God's terms. And by coming forward, there's no exam to be taken. There's no membership thing that you would have had to have done. There's no, and so, for families, I think first it's just knowing that, like we want your kids there. And I don't care if they're crazy or rowdy or if they do silly things. That makes it even better, honestly. But then also, like, as you said, like just trust and know that repetition is doing something in the life of your child. It's doing something in the life of all of us. And what a gift it is to be able to do it together, and then hopefully what a gift that is, trust and know that God in your church and we are all participating in something that's really formative for us. And along the way there's opportunity to have conversation, but
like I think it was 2 weeks ago, 3 maybe. I think it was the first Sunday. The kids didn't leave. They were there the whole time. So we got to the Lord's Prayer, and they've been learning it in Katy First Kids. And I don't know if it sounded like this to the whole room, but at least from where we were, you could hear the little voices saying the Lord's Prayer. And I promise you, those kids did not know what it meant to pray on earth as it is in heaven. Or even like maybe even a sense of like daily bread, right? Like they don't have the deep theology of it, but their voices added to ours as we were praying this prayer was a gift for all of us to get to hear. And also this beautiful reminder of the way we are formed in grace and in the goodness of God, whether we know it or not.
Yeah.
Just by being in the presence of God with one another, all of that, right?
Yeah.
Just because God's grace is at work.
Yeah.
So I think about that moment a lot, actually. Those
Yeah.
little voices. Or like when they sing, like I can see them, which not everybody can do, but I can, when they're trying so hard to sing along with the hymns and stuff, and when you catch their voices, or it's beautiful. Yeah. It's a gift.
It is.
So just keep, bringing them to be a part of the story. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that you have found some inspiration and encouragement for yourself and for your family. If you'd like to get our weekly podcast delivered directly to you, you can subscribe or follow us on Apple Podcast. Just like a hippopotamus. Apple Podcast, Spotify, or YouTube. I realized I hadn't been saying that, even though that's how most people watch. For more information about Katy First and the gazillion upcoming events we have going on for Advent and Christmas, you can visit our website at katyfirst.org. Most importantly, we want you to know that in the middle of your ordinary, messy life, whatever that looks like for you in this moment, that you are not alone, you are doing a good job, and you are so, so loved.
And we'd love to see you on Sunday because Pastor Becca's preaching.
I think
Yay! And
Are you sure?
It's the last Sunday of the year.
That's right. It is.
Of the year, because Advent starts a new calendar year.
A new liturgical year.
Yeah, so join us for the last...
I get to have the last word. Is that what you're saying?
You get the last word. You get the last word on communion, the last word on Jesus, all of it. And then, we do have a lot of Advent stuff coming up. We're doing Advent for families.
Yes,
so we'd love
I'm very excited about it in the fellowship hall.
December 1st,
8th, 15th, and 22nd. Yep,
it'll have,
yes, at 9:45 till about 10:30, 10:40. Yeah. We'll have all kinds of activities and things for you to also take home and do with your family for Advent.
Yeah. So have a great week, and we'll see you on Sunday.